Well, you've spent the last couple of hours discussing SDGs, talking about solutions. What came of those conversations? If you could please just tell me one by one. We'll start with Mr. Bonturi.
Very good. Thank you so much. We, of course, discussing partnerships. We all agreed that it's essential for the achievement of the SDGs. We agreed that partnerships have to be about implementation. We looked at the challenges of implementation, and we focus a lot on the capacity of governments to organize themselves, to coordinate internally, to coordinate across levels of government, to have the right consultation mechanisms, to understand the trade-offs between the different goals, and to use effectively the budget processes and procurement processes and the broader public governance processes in support of SDG implementation. So that was the main challenge we looked at. Then we decided what is it that the councils could do to address this issue, the implementation gaps. And we felt that the governments would need support, first of all, to understand, to have a framework of what was needed, what type of a checklist, things that they needed to put in place. But then going beyond that, to start developing good practices, to start creating peer learning opportunities, having country reviews, and moving towards some type of platform where countries could then demand the support of fellow practitioners from other countries that would be deployed to increase the capacity of governments to deliver on the SDGs. So we're building up from developing a conceptual framework to developing, codifying good practices, all the way to a very concrete platform that countries can on demand ask for support. Linked to that, we felt it was very, very important that we were able to map the partnerships, what was available out there. We heard that there are already hundreds and hundreds of partnerships that are created every year. Those partnerships sometimes don't even involve governments. Private sector, international organizations, civil society, a number of stakeholders out there. They need to be brought into the picture. We have to have a good mapping. And then this platform that I mentioned can also develop a role of matchmaking. And there's so many possibilities out there. The countries can very easily get lost. They don't know what's available. So the Council felt that as we develop a platform to support countries, it's also supporting the dissemination of information of what's available out there, and linking this, of course, on the implementation on the recommendation of the other councils, health, education, poverty. Very, very important to link across. The issue of budget processes, again, very, very important. And not only use budget processes to decide on the allocation of resources, but also very concretely and very actively use the budget processes to achieve societal goals, be it on gender, be it on green budgeting. So there's a very active use of budgetary tools to achieve the SDGs.
Now, you mentioned partnerships. SDGs require massive financing. How is the OECD encouraging the private investment that's essential for long-term sustainable development?
We are looking, of course, of the role of official development assistance and how to first of all, how to leverage that, how to increase it, and we keep very much having an advocacy role that countries should increase ODA, should better target ODA, but should also be smart and strategic on how to leverage that to create opportunities for other sources of financing. We just developed the principles for blended finance at the OECD, and we feel there's a great multiplier effect of using ODA to help achieve the SDGs and mobilizing private sector foundations and other sectors as well.
Dr. Maria Delmas, you are discussing today SDG 3. What came of your cluster conversations?
Okay, Actually, first thing I would like to thank all the cluster members because of their very passionate and enthusiastic discussion. We actually agreed on a mission and a vision, and the vision mainly is to help more people to live healthier and more productive lives. We also came up with a program for the next 2 years, and basically we're trying to initiate a process for a learning platform and an observatory function. And the tangible action that we came up, the idea that of course will need to be developed a bit further, is to invite a small number of countries who would want to communicate good practices where they have been able to achieve certain targets in their SDG 3 area, and we can evaluate what made them make it, and then share this information with the other countries in the selected initial small group, and so that this good practice, this learning can be then adapted and adopted by the other countries. And the idea is that incrementally over the 2 years, the number of countries will be increasing. So we're seeing a number of a progress which will happen after evaluation of perhaps the first small group, and then continuing with further increase in the number of countries. We are seeing about learning good practice, as I said, perhaps the critical points, what made things fly off or not. There could be also an idea of pairing a country that has a success story and a country who has finding challenges still, and learning between each other, but also disseminating the information at a wider level.
So sharing best practices, and Malta actually is in its own right a success story, reaching its SDG targets, ranking 22nd out of 157 countries studied last summer. That's fantastic. How is the health sector faring in particular?
Of course, I'm biased because I'm from the health sector itself. So I think I will try to give an objective. We are actually doing well, perhaps on the healthcare services issue. So our life expectancy is quite high compared even to the GDP of the country, and also our healthy life expectancy is relatively high. However, we need to work much more on the prevention side, and that is where the issue is our biggest challenge, because we have a high obesity problem, and especially obesity in children. So that is the future, as it is. And that is the challenge that we are working more, perhaps even increasing the effort. So our GDP percentage on health is increasing gradually, but we need to increase the proportion of the expenditure which is devoted to promotion and prevention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Amin, you were discussing SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, which is a huge challenge. What were the results of your cluster conversations?
Well, it's a huge challenge, but we had the tremendous good fortune that it's probably the best defined challenge of all of them. So we don't have to do everything like everybody else seems to. It's very clear. It's focused on the energy sector. So we had 3 elements to this discussion, which I think are preconditions for success. One, we have a lot of good news that's happening already. The economics for clean energy are transforming very, very rapidly. We're seeing the cost of renewable energy technology coming down. We did an assessment for the G20 last year together with the International Energy Agency, looking at decarbonization, and part of my mission is to make life easier for my dear friend, Dr. Thani Al-Ziyudi. So the potential for renewable energy plus energy efficiency to keep carbon emissions to a level which would see us having below 2 degrees change in temperature by 2050 is something that we think that we are on track for. So we are beginning to address the mitigation challenge, so that's a very positive thing, but it's on the basis of technology costs dropping exponentially. We've just released a major costing study which looked at 15,000 data points around the world at utility scale, which shows that by 2020, virtually every renewable technology will be cost effective on the grid in competition with any conventional source. So this is a very positive framework. So we had to discuss this, a very dynamic, young, energetic group, including myself, of course. We had a very vibrant discussion. I think that what we decided was that a lot of the transition that is happening with larger companies, utility scale investment, large scale technology innovation, is something many people are working on, and it's actually happening. So maybe where we needed to focus in terms of where the councils could have an impact and where the WGS could have measurable impact was on the whole question of access. So we developed a very clear vision and mission statements. Vision is basically to support a rapid transformation to a sustainable, low-carbon energy future that is inclusive and democratic, reduces poverty, unleashes economic productivity and welfare and technology for a prosperous, fair, and climate-friendly future. So that's the vision, and I think that's a very achievable vision. The mission we tried to focus down, and that'll cover the points I'll come to in terms of the implementation agenda, but the mission is to support critical dimensions of the ongoing energy transformation that advance sustainable livelihoods, self-reliance, and equitable access for all by empowering relevant stakeholders to achieve tangible progress. So the objective is to address those 1 billion people without access to modern energy services, and to do it on the basis of technologies and business models that are available today. So we came up with a roadmap that has 4 components to it, which we feel really go to the heart of what needs to be done. The first is on entrepreneurship, and I think it's a common conviction among us in the energy field that conventional development assistance is not going to cut the mustard as far as this is concerned. What we need is to unleash entrepreneurship and investment. So the first is to empower entrepreneurs in underserved communities, in particular rural women, to develop viable delivery models for renewable energy solutions. We have pilot projects that have tremendous success. In West Africa, we had an entrepreneurial training program for rural women, which has completely changed the lives of many, many families in rural areas, and which is a sustainable livelihood, which gives them skills and income and transforms energy access in their areas. So that's one we can replicate around the world. The second is to support small island states for energy transition towards 100% renewables share that enhances energy self-sufficiency, resilience, and long-term sustainability. The islands are the ones who are most impacted by climate and who have the most severe needs in terms of energy security and energy access. We have a very successful experience so far, many actors on the islands agenda. 5 or 6 islands have already declared 100% renewable future. We feel this is a very achievable objective. We were careful about saying it in the past, but I think today we can start to work on an initiative that takes islands to 100% renewable future, and we'll have this discussion with Dr. Thani in the climate discussion about how islands' futures can be shaped for climate. And the third is to create a facility to improve accessibility to tailor-made and repurposed and affordable technology solutions for sustainable livelihood development. We see a huge number of new innovations that are happening in renewables-powered devices which can be used to transform lives in the rural areas. Basic agricultural processes, not just lighting, but cooking. The fact that now solar can run all kinds of productive devices for agriculture, for food processing and storage and so on, is to find which are the transformational technologies and to make those available through partnerships to the right people in the rural areas. And finally, to facilitate the diffusion of mini and microgrid technologies in rural areas to accelerate progress towards reaching the goal of universal modern energy access. Today, the mini grids and microgrids have a business case that is compelling. That has happened just in the last couple of years in terms of technological development that's happened. And the mini grids present the possibility for large-scale energy access in populations that today are not served with modern electricity services. Now, we believe all of these are achievable. We have part of the roadmap is that we have an international off-grid renewable energy conference that will take part in Singapore later in the year as part of Singapore Energy Week. We will have practitioners in energy access from around the world as part of that conference, and we hope to move forward this agenda together with other actors by the time we get to Singapore.
Fantastic progress, Dr. Amin. Now, where exactly are you planning on replicating the rural projects, and how quickly do you think this could be done?
We think it's very possible to do it quickly because the success we had in West Africa has given us a lot of experience in terms of how these schemes work, what kind of training needs to be done, what kind of equipment needs to be made available, what business models work in what settings. We have taken the West African success factors and we are now developing a program in Southern Africa, and we believe that this is possible to do in many rural areas in Africa and in Asia. So we will be looking for specific places and partners who can do that. You know, one of our members, Harish Hande there, has had tremendous success in developing this model in India as a business model, not as charity or as a handout, but as something that is self-sustaining. And there are a number of other partners we'll have around the table to look at specific solutions.
There are several challenges, though, to achieving these partnerships. What types of issues does IRENA face when they're trying to secure these partnerships to successfully switch to clean energy?
The principal success factor is getting the right people around the table and identifying the community of practice that brings the kind of skills that you need to pass on to the practitioners. And I think that has always been a constraint in the past. But what we've seen with the energy around the clean energy space today and the energy access discussion is how many of these actors are now willing to come to the table, share their experiences. We have SMEs in Africa that have pioneered pay-as-you-go systems with household solar solutions that provide very low-cost solutions and that electrify households that have never seen modern energy solutions before. So there are so many actors now, and it's a question of how do we bring them to the table and leverage the solutions.
And we did hear earlier that SDGs do need to become, SMEs do need to become more involved in SDGs. So it's great that that's moving ahead. Dr. Bin Bishir from Dubai Smart Office, we would love to hear what came of SDG 11 talks, sustainable cities and communities.
Yeah, even though that in the last 2 years, we mapped all our strategies and policies in Dubai with the SDGs, I've never thought that I would work very closely with SDG teams and groups. But here I am, and I'm glad to have the opportunity as a city manager to be involved in an international dialogue like this, sharing the challenges that city have. Especially today in such platforms, they discuss it from a country level, from a federal level, wherein the operation happen down there in the city level. And all the different objectives of the SDGs, they happen in that territory of a city. So I'm glad to be here to discuss what can we do as cities. And I believe more mayors involved in SDGs make SDGs more happen and eventually maintain these results. One of the things and the main challenge I believe we will face in SDG 11 is the different maturity level between cities. Cities are, some of them are very advanced, but not all of them. When you talk about sustainability, for some cities, sustainability is different than sustainability in Dubai. Sustainability in a village or a small town in Africa is entirely different. So one of the things we want to look into it is to put a proper framework wherein cities can take it from a different perspective and can go back and implement it. Another aspect is to put a proper measurement that these cities can also take it a practical KPIs or measurement that they can understand from which level they need to go and implement these SDGs. But also to work around partnership. Today, cities alone cannot implement these SDGs. SDGs needs lots of finance, and I believe all of us here share the same aspect. But as cities, we can bring more fund to SDGs than countries. Bringing private sector, entrepreneurs, startups with us from a crowd perspective to finance SDGs, and I believe that's what we can add value from the work we will have during the coming 2 years. And I believe like by next year, we will come up with the pilot solutions, whether it be a platform to share best practices, because I do believe there is no shame in copy and paste what's happened around us. Why we do reinvent the wheel, especially projects that are like very obvious and clear around sustainability. So copy and paste projects happen around these cities, sharing these practices in a platform, utilizing artificial intelligence and big data to promote SDGs across cities also can be promoted on top of this platform. So these are some of the challenges and findings we've discussed in our council.
Dr. bin Bishir, artificial intelligence is not new to Dubai, and coming from Dubai Smart Office, how have you been using partnerships to work towards your SDG goal?
Yeah, we've come a long way when talking about financing our projects, especially when talking about advanced technologies. They cost big amounts. Talking about blockchain, talking about a digital backbone of a city or artificial intelligence platform. So what we've done here in Dubai, like we partner with a telecom company to take the risk with the city in building such kind of platforms. And we want also to share this practice with others, that let us bring the private sector, let us share the risk in implementing these new technologies for our benefits. And again, let us share also the profit at the end of the day. Talking about the blockchain, we had the same also concern. Can the blockchain take Dubai to the next level? Can the blockchain work as a transactional platform for Dubai? We can't build it alone and take this risk. At least I can't do it alone. So now we are working very closely with two of the leaders in this sector, IBM and Consensus, to build for us a platform and to share also best practices happen in different private sector entities to be implemented in our city. This kind of a mutual agreement between the government and opening the door for the private sector to come and fund some of these projects. And I believe this is one of the main tools that we can take it and share it as a best practice with others.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, life below water, a very challenging SDG. What came of your cluster conversations?
Well, I won't repeat what Dr. Tani said because the Minister has very succinctly summed up the way we had our discussion. So let me bring an ocean perspective to it. Firstly, for those of you that haven't heard the bad news, the ocean is in much worse trouble than most people realize. Ocean change is underway on a very worrying scale, and that is the bad news. The good news is that we have a plan to save life in the ocean, and it's called SDG 14. And those of you who are not familiar with it, I do ask that you have a really close look at it and communicate it to your communities, because without SDG 14, our grandchildren will not know life in the ocean the way we have known it. So when you look at SDG 14, you see that, and when you look at ocean change, you see it is dominated by climate change, anthropogenically created climate change. And I refer to ocean acidification, directly related to greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which will make it very difficult for calcium-based life forms like shellfish and even vertebrates to exist in the ocean. I refer to deoxygenation, not just the spread of hypoxic dead zones, which are spreading all around the world where there is no life, but also the lowering levels of oxygen in the ocean, which make it harder for life in the ocean to breathe, and is already showing smaller fish sizes. I refer to ocean warming, obviously again directly related to climate change, which is making it harder for life in the tropics to be able to sustain the high water temperatures, and that's why you're seeing the migration of various species north and south from the tropics. And of course I refer to rising sea levels, which I come from Fiji, and two of our neighboring countries are going to go under the water because of that. So you can see the direct linkage between oceans problems and climate change. And it was for this reason that I came to Dr. Tani and said, can we subsume our SDG 14 work, and indeed SDG 15 work, the terrestrial SDG, into the climate change group this afternoon, which he kindly agreed to. So, coming from Fiji, the indivisibility of all this is so apparent. For islanders, we see in the morning the clouds building above the sea, the moisture coming out of the sea, forming the cloud, and then the cloud comes in on the southeast trade, hits the mountain. We have the downpour of the rain in the afternoon. It comes down through the rainforest, and now, because of agriculture, industrialization, and urbanization, it comes through the human areas, picking up the industrial runoff, the fertilizer runoff, the sewage, taking it into the rivers, out into the lagoons, and the circle continues. We see this on a daily basis. So for us to artificially divide this process into different SDGs obviously is convenient but nonsensical in terms of the reality of life. So that is why we were very keen today in our discussions to link these 3 environmental goals. Of course, accepting their linkage to all the other SDGs, particularly consumption patterns, food, poverty, etc. These are all linked to the environmental goals, but particularly to cluster these 3 environmental goals together to say, let's work together on this. Now, this is a very important step, I think, coming out of this weekend, because often I face the criticism of, why are you just dealing with oceans? Why can't you talk about forests and climate change at the same time, since these are linked? Now I'll be able to say, of course we're talking about it. Haven't you heard of the initiative that came out of the UAE meeting? We are clustered together on this. Now, in terms of that being practical, one of my jobs as the special envoy for the ocean is to make sure that all the various endeavors going on around the world are in fact working in synchronicity. And we have a representative here from the Norwegian government. You heard the Prime Minister of Norway announce recently a high-level panel which is going to be working on sustainable blue economy. You would have heard our announcement from Davos about the formation of the Friends of Ocean Action, a group of 40 to 50 thought leaders, individuals from around the world who are helping us develop action programs in the ocean, which the World Economic Forum will be the secretariat of. You've perhaps, and if you haven't, I really do ask that you go to a website, theoceanconference.un.org. Have a look there at the 9 communities of ocean action which have been formed from the 1,400 voluntary commitments which governments and organizations made at the Ocean Conference last year. On that website, you'll see that there are now 9 communities of ocean action who are working on making those voluntary commitments real. So I don't want to dominate too long here, but just to say that we are now in the years of implementation. We have the plans. Everything is in place to do what needs to be done, but we are in the years of implementation. So this afternoon, when we were talking about our roadmap, it was very much about bringing together all these various plans, these various groups that have got together, and implementing. And if I could just leave you with one thought of a realizable implementation action which would have huge impact on the plastic pollution problem that the world is now seized with. We know that the great majority of plastic pollution enters the ocean through rivers. And it's not just the 10 rivers that you've seen on that website, it's rivers all around the world that are carrying plastic from the streets of our cities and through rubbish dumps into the ocean. So the technology exists to put river booms in place to collect that plastic before it gets into the ocean. And this is something that could be done by private enterprise, it could be done by local authorities, it could be done by cities, it could be done by nations.
Why are such technologies not being more broadly used?
We are in the years of implementation. I believe that between now and 2020, which will be I hope the next Ocean Conference, the next moment of accountability for SDG 14, because 4 of our targets in SDG 14 mature in 2020, I believe that in those 3 years you will see a huge investment in river booms to collect plastic before it gets into the ocean, because the world is looking for solutions to that particularly glaring problem.
So what we can take from your comments is ocean acidification, overfishing, pollution. This can all best be remedied through partnerships, essentially.
Absolutely. These are human-created problems that obviously, as a result, would have human-created solutions.
That makes perfect sense, sir. Ms. Flanagan, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. What came of your cluster discussions?
Well, I just wanted to first thank my really incredible group of collaborators in this SDG 9 discussion about industry, innovation, and infrastructure. We decided to take a bold approach, and we wanted to propose that we will have 2020 exemplar sustainable innovations across manufacturing, transport, and so on by 2020. So 2020 exemplar innovations that we could point to as a community and say, these can be scaled, these can be moved. And I think some of our ideas, of course, reflect many of the things mentioned earlier. And being a collaborative partnership, I think we should notice when we're building on some of those ideas, like the idea of shared platforms has come up several times. The idea of using what already exists and trying to find those things and link them together is a big deal. Our group focused on well-being in the environment and well-being of the environment and the people on a very real and local level. So this was something that came out of our group with themes of equity and inclusivity across all of the discussions. So that was a huge theme for us. And for a vision for SDG 9, we really decided to aim to create an integrated open ecosystem that focuses on sustainable, novel approaches to industry and infrastructure in a time of rapid change in the fourth industrial revolution. So the keywords for us were sustainable and novel. We kind of hedged on the word innovation a little bit, but I can always explain that a little bit later. But our mission statement was really to look at a bold prototype-driven approach, an actionable to go along with an actionable framework and roadmap, and accountability with a timeline. So. Depending on the resources available, we can plot out our work with locally relevant solutions. So for our current kind of timeline, we really looked at an ambitious 2-year stint, which we were confident about, and I'll explain a little bit about that in a moment. These kind of prototypes that we're suggesting could be mobile tactical infrastructures, looking at mobile populations, looking at refugee crises. We wanted to look at connectivity, microgrids, ad hoc networks, sustainable banks, and other approaches. And a key phrase for us was challenging conventional wisdom. So local, shareable solutions to global problems. So our roadmap actually charted progress through 4 pillars. So one was the transfer of experience, that we get this knowledge shared and get a platform or set of platforms. And there's not going to be one monolithic knowledge bank. It's going to be creating these networks to transfer experience. Thinking about infrastructure, which links us to the other SDGs, water, transit, electricity, looking at environmentalism, and then also pushing innovation and research. Because there were interesting correlations, maybe not causations, in the data about the countries that are spending the most money on research have the lower emissions, have better policies in place. So that's a theme for us. We wanted to start by looking at the data, knowing what's out there, a lay of the land, and establishing metrics and methodologies for how we would actually be measuring things. And a timeline is a little bit of a misnomer for us because we recognize that this has to be iterative, that we have to, especially because we're coming up with this prototype-driven process, we wanted to actually go back to an invention, see how it plays out, see the success, see how it's scalable, and then kind of iterate and loop onwards from that timeline. So 20 sustainable innovation exemplars by 2020, and we have commitments from several members of our group to establish a few of those. So that was very exciting.
Fantastic. So we can hear a follow-up about this next year, presumably at this same event. I think what we've understood from what you've just said is that industry, innovation, and infrastructure is a very broad subject. Where should the focus really be?
I think the focus has to be on on the ways in which people can bring together these notions of well-being for the environment and people and livelihood. Jobs are changing at a rapid pace. There are all kinds of figures floating around out there from different reports, but many of the jobs we even have today, if we think about workforce and jobs, aren't even going to exist in 20 years. Everything's changing so quickly. This is why we wanted to come up with a tactical approach. New manufacturing techniques, automation will shift things dramatically in any region. So instead of building monolithic plans for development, this kind of tactical mobile approach actually may suit the changing workforce and infrastructures.
Okay, I think we will wrap this up here. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you to everyone who has participated in the SDGs in Action event today. We will hopefully meet again next year to discuss progress and to compare notes and build on the ideas that have been shared today. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of the summit.